Hi, my name is Renee. I'm from Halifax, and this is Becoming a Lawyer. Little me, little Renee. Little Renee was really quiet, not because I didn't have my moments, but it was just because I like to observe and see things before I commented on it. Myself as a child, very artistic, um, really touchy feely, in tune with nature. Honestly, not that much different from who I am today. I would say I was definitely more reserved. Um, I wasn't very close with a lot of people, except my family knew that I was like low key crazy and I like to yap a lot. But in public, like very calm, even a little shy. I didn't really like talking to people or meeting new people. I found it really hard and annoying. But I loved to play inside, outside. I loved to ride my bike. That was a big thing, bike rides all the time. Swimming, I'm a water baby. You could always catch me in the pool. Um, oh, and also like smart, I guess. Like that's a good thing to say. Like I was a smart child. I knew when and when not to bother people, which is kind of weird, but um, I also could like sense when things were not going well with people and maybe like giving them a little bit more grace as a child, which you don't necessarily think of. And then what else can I say? Oh, and going back to the idea of being smart, like I did well in school without having to try too hard. There weren't too many subjects that I found really difficult, which is a blessing. And I enjoyed learning. Like I liked school. Like I liked going to school to see my friends and hang out and learn something and then go home. So I actually have a really good story for why I wanted to become a lawyer. If you've ever seen the movie The Hurricane, you'll understand that you'll understand where I'm coming from. So when I was about 13, 14, maybe even 15, I watched the movie The Hurricane, and the story is about the story is a retelling of a true story about Reuben Hurricane Carter, who was a boxing champion in the United States, and he was wrongfully convicted of murder. He spent over 20 years in prison. Don't fact check me, but he spent over 20 years in prison trying to fight his own case. And then a young black man from New York, whose name is Lesra Martin, decided that he wanted to help in any way that he could. He also came from a disadvantaged background. He put himself through law school to be able to get Reuben Hurricane Carter acquitted. Spoiler alert. Anyways, so watching that movie, it was really heartfelt, and I just recognized that people who look like me have a harder time gaining access to legal services, but also just like that unfair treatment of always being assumed to be in the wrong really spoke to me. And so that is what prompted me to want to be a lawyer. And I wanted to be a criminal lawyer, criminal defense lawyer specifically. I thought that it was really important that, people who don't have the opportunity to have good legal representation and who don't have an understanding of the law to be well equipped in their processes. I think looking at my parents, specifically my mom, because I spent a lot of time growing up with her, I share the ability to be compassionate. I think my mom, despite everything, gives people the benefit of the doubt. And I would say, as I grow and become older, I do the same thing unconsciously. And that's something that I really admire about her. So the next question is, where did you go for primary and high school? So I grew up just outside of Halifax in the HRM. And for primary school, I went to Kingswood Elementary. And then for middle school, I went to Madeline Simons Middle School. High school, Charles P. Allen High School. Number two. How would you describe those developmental years? Looking back on it as an adult, I would never want to go back to grade school only because I found that their method of evaluation was unfair. Um, not even for myself because I did quite well, but I just didn't really understand why we were evaluating people the way that we did. So I would say that was hard. Also, growing up as a black woman or a mixed race woman in a predominantly white neighborhood was really difficult. There might have been like 10 black students, maybe. Um, so I think that I questioned my identity from a very young age. And yeah, that was definitely something that formed my character and who I am and how I believe that I'm perceived because it was quite blatant. Otherwise, I really miss being a child in those developmental years because you don't realize how good you have it until you become an adult and you're responsible for yourself. Question 3. Is there an individual, perhaps an adult, who left a mark on you growing up? A role model, etc.? What about them made you look up to them or love them for who they are and what they stood up for? I would say that somebody who was like a role model to me was Madame Smith. She was my history teacher for grades 10, 11, and 12. And I think despite everybody else not really liking her, I liked that she was very much herself. She didn't care what anybody thought. And she was extremely smart. Like, she is Russian. She became a lawyer. She immigrated to Canada, decided not to practice, and became a school teacher. And I think that her experience and what she brought to the classroom, her love for history was like, very impactful. Madame Smith was also very understanding of social justice. And I think that her background as a lawyer made me feel more connected to her once I realized that I wanted to go to law school. Recognizing also that she had this really wonderful way of speaking and persuading you to enjoy what you were learning. Um, and she was also very like non bullshit. She said it how it was, and that's how it is. And we went with it. And I don't think I could have asked for a better experience. Question 4. How would you define your relationship with education? I love learning. I love learning. I think that it's really weird to say because as much as I love it, I do complain about it only because I think that it can be a lot of work. And one of the things that I'm coming to the realization now is not that I don't enjoy school or formal education. It's the idea that I don't like being evaluated. I love learning to learn. I am in law school, which means I have a degree before, a Bachelor of Arts in Criminology. I have started my master's in public administration, and now I'm doing the Juris Doctor. I also am a Reiki practitioner, which I forget all the time. I have a certification in breath work. I am a yoga teacher. I love reading. I've read, I think, 2 or 3 books since I've been in South Africa, which has only been like 2 months. Um, so I am always seeking for something new. But where I have qualms with the traditional education system is that I think it's lacking in a lot of foundational principles that we would learn in community rather than in the school. And when I say what we would learn in community is, I'm going to go on a tangent, is the idea that we're living in a very individualistic society. And when we go to school, we're learning to be individuals who can do math, understand history, very little social sciences. And then we go into a degree so that we can get a job, so that the job can sustain our individual livelihoods, et cetera, et cetera. But what we're missing is that community aspect. So, how did you phrase it? So, if there were amendments that I would make to the learning curriculum or traditional schooling in general, is I would I would scrap formal evaluations. I think that we, instead of testing and multiple choice and writing what you know closed book, I think that we could have conversations. We could be evaluated on our ability to speak to one another and how we interact with the community, whether that's the whole classroom, the school, outside of the school. Um, Other things that I would also encourage schooling systems to teach is respect for human dignity. So, whether that be towards the self or towards the other, I think that we're really lacking in consideration and respect for the people around us. And it's really showing because we don't know how to converse and allow people to be themselves. I also think that we should have a module on finances because a lot of us are financially illiterate, and that's a bigger problem when you are working and you are wanting to um, create a life for yourself based on what you see and what you can afford. And money management is something that is extremely important, especially when it comes to taxes, tax law. Mhm. We're going to move on to question 5. What was your major in university and why the choice is if you could rewind in time, would you have pursued a different degree, diploma? Why or why not? Okay. Um, my undergrad, my Bachelor of Arts was in criminology. I wanted to do a double major, criminology, psychology. I decided not to do the double major just because I didn't want to do statistics again, which is terrible, but I ended up finishing a semester early and that was the way I wanted to go with it. Would I have changed it? Well, I got the minor in psychology, major in criminology, BA overall. And although I wouldn't change it because I really like the perspective it gave me on what the study of crime is and how we as a world are forming the ways of dealing with, preventing, and reacting to crime is very interesting. And I think it trickles into every aspect of our life. I might have done international relations now that I know what it is, only because I have an interest in traveling in different cultures and being an ambassador to a country seems really cool. In my undergrad, I wish I had taken more anthropology classes, more religion, religious studies. I really like psychology and I really like sociology. Um, but yeah, I wish I was a little bit more well rounded in what I took. Question number 6. What is one word you would use to define your time in university and why? Considering I'm still in university, I'm going to refer to my undergrads. That period was liberating. I think that going from high school, being in a very regimented environment and moving into a more accountable environment where you have to take care of your own things. You're responsible for when you show up. If you do show up, um, you're able to mix and mingle with a lot more people. Your circle becomes more diverse. You start to learn more about the world. Um, yeah, I just feel like I was doing a lot in a good way. But yeah, I would say liberating and fun. Like I had so much fun in my undergrad, meeting different people, seeing my friends every day, studying together, working, traveling. This period of university I would describe or define as deconstructing. I had a preconceived notion of what law, policy, government was when I came into the degree. And not only am I changing my ideas of what it is, but I'm also trying to deconstruct it in the way that it is presented. The law is very Eurocentric, it's very white dominating. It is centered on power and authority, and it usually is biased towards people who have melanated skin or come from less financially advantageous communities. And so I don't want to go into the legal field having those same biases. I want to make sure that I am fully aware of the communities that I'm serving and who are being affected by the work that I will be doing. And so I'm taking the time to decolonize my thoughts and rebuild it to be a bit more comprehensive of what the world is actually offering and what the law actually does. We are now coming into the last segment, which is about studying law. From my own understanding, how do I define law? Hmm. Well, I would define law as a set of principles that guide behavior and create order within a society. I would also say that law governs what individuals and private entities can and cannot do within the world in relation to each other. And yeah, we'll stop there because the law is quite comprehensive. Question number 2. Before taking on studying law, what were some of your misconceptions? Before studying law, I thought the law was straightforward and simple to interpret, and I was wrong. Um, Laws in Canada are can be quite old and sometimes even draw from British law, which is even older. And it can be hard to understand what they had intended to want out of their laws. And even the laws that are created today, sometimes they are a bit too expansive or broad that the interpretation and what you would think is right is actually the complete opposite. I also thought that law was created with the good in mind, but it's really economical. The economics of law is to make sure that the most people are protected, the most amount of people are protected for that good. There's a sort of economics of law that there's a sort of economics of law that maintains that as long as you are protecting the majority of people, you don't have to protect all people. And that was one of my misconceptions. Like, misconceptions. For the most part, you're trying to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people or for the minority groups. And sometimes it just doesn't play out like that. Question 3. What field of law are you dedicated to and why? I still feel like I don't know what area of law I want to dedicate myself to outside of human rights and social justice. That's where I see myself doing the most of my work, whether that actually be within an institution or on my own volition is unclear yet. But human rights as the foundation of everything. Um, but knowing that I'm going into practice and I'll soon be articling, I really do hope to have a more concrete and narrow focus on corporate commercial and technology law. I'm really interested in information technology and tech law. I think it's something that is increasingly important as AI develops and data becomes even more important to individuals and businesses and even governments. And I want to make sure that it's used in ways that don't harm individuals. So we'll see. That was a really big answer to say, I don't know. Or property law is really interesting as well. Also, it's very transactional. So I wouldn't be holding files for a long time. And despite thinking that I would excel in a courtroom doing litigation, I don't see myself there yet. Yet. Question number 4. In my opinion, what characteristics make a good lawyer? Compassion, empathy, discernment, motivated, self motivated, active listening. Sorry. uh, I don't remember the five that I just gave, but I want to touch on active listening for a second, just because in my experience, it worked out. In law school, you usually have to do a moot or two, they're compulsory, but I think that they're really great opportunities to learn about yourself and how you would conduct yourself in a courtroom, but then also how you react to your opposition, your friends' arguments. And I didn't feel confident about my moot. I remember the topic was about IP addresses, and our whole argument was the idea that IP addresses are personal information and thus should not be able to be retained without a warrant. Okay. And, it's a lot easier to say that this isn't a constitutional challenge and it's within anybody's rights to find the IP address, whatever, whatever. So I just sat there. I was the first or the second to give my arguments. So I had my partner and then two opposing members give their submissions. And the whole time, maybe because I was upset about my own arguments, I just sat there listening and taking notes about everything that they said that was either wrong or would help my case. And at the end, they offer you an opportunity to rebut. And honestly, I didn't really care enough, but I wanted to make a point because I had created a long list of things that I thought were important to say for my argument. And so I rebutted, and it turned into an honors mark. And I did really well in the course just because I decided to listen, reflect, and create a thought. And I think, especially as law students, we believe that everything should be fought for, and that's not necessarily true. I think there are opportunities where you might not need to rebut because your argument was strong in the first place. But I think also taking that chance and being able to express what everybody else in the courtroom heard is extremely important. And I think it would also create a lot less confusion in situations of negotiation, litigation, arbitration, etc. Number 5, what do you struggle with most on this journey to becoming a lawyer? I struggle the most with the idea of selling out as a lawyer. I think that a lot of people who identify themselves as melanated, whether that be black, brown, indigenous, etc., we have this idea that we should go into this field so that we can help our communities. And while that is really important and it's really good, and I'm sure that we all have those altruistic sentiments, it doesn't always serve us in the long run. And so when we sell out, it's when we go to big law, it's when we go to corporate law, and we decide to do the work because we need compensation. But after 3 years of a lot of money, you do need that money. And so I would say that I struggle most with that, especially you might have heard in my answer, like the idea that I want to do commercial, corporate, tech law is like so foreign to me because I feel like I should be helping those who've helped me or those who I see need help. So that's a constant struggle, is the idea of where can I sit and be ethical and be aligned with my values. What advice do you have to anyone about to take on this journey? Be gentle with yourself. Anybody who wants to become a lawyer doesn't anybody who wants to become a lawyer does it for one reason or another. There's always something motivating you and pushing you forward, and don't let little things discourage you. I promise that it will be okay at the end. Your grades do matter to an extent, but I want you to, if I were you, if I were talking if I were talking to myself right now, I would tell me to not worry so much about the grades or the law firm or anything else but making good friends and taking the time to actually enjoy what you learn. Whatever it is going to be useful, and you're going to use it as you move into the industry. So don't worry, don't stress, be gentle with yourself, do as much as you can. And when you can no longer, take time for yourself. I think that self care is also extremely important because this industry burns you out. Even school burns you out. You have assignments, you have readings, you have court, maybe depending on what year and what courses or clinics you're doing. So, really take the time to establish a routine that works for you. One where you have a social life, one where you do things like hobbies, one where you're active and you're just walking or meeting friends for a jog. Um, I would say don't take yourself too seriously. You're human and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from those mistakes. So, those are all of the advices I would give. If I was given the power to pass a law right now, what would it be and why? Ooh, okay. If I were to pass a law right now, it would be so that I can be dictator of the world, which I know is kind of crazy, but I just have a lot of big ideas. So I would do that. But that might be my second one, you know? If I were to make a law right now, it would be a law of redistribution. I think that it's really important to share the wealth. And I say it like that because it sounds silly, but I think it's really important that we look at our economic and power structures and how they are creating further problems in society. And I think that regulating it in some form will solve part of the problem. Not all of it, but if I had to pick one law, it would be to redistribute wealth to the hands of people who need it, to the hands of people who can innovate, to the hands of people who will create business and inventions that will support our growth as humankind, um, that will solve, not solve, but at least support us in climate change. That's what I would do. And number 8, what do you think you bring to the table if a firm were to offer you a position? I hope I hope that none of the firms that I've interviewed with see this, but also I hope that they do. What I bring to the table is a holistic perspective. I'm not only looking at what I can do for a client, but I'm also looking at what I can do for a firm, how firms should grow and evolve over time. I have some entrepreneurial experience. And so not only do I want to work in growing the business as a lawyer, but I want to work in growing a firm as a community member, as a pillar of society that people will want to come to, and will want to work with, especially in government relations, government contracts, um, businesses, etc. So if you just heard that, think about me next time you want to grow in a different way. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on why I wanted to become a lawyer, which I need to remind myself of more often. And for anybody listening, thank you for taking the time to hear out my experience. And, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, I'm always here to help you out. Again, I am a 4th year JD MPA student at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and my name is Renee. Toodles.